And that's what I was just going to tell you all. So we are recording us speaking. The camera's on us, not on you guys, but just letting everyone know that we are recording. And if there's questions later, just that all will be included, and we will provide the recording afterwards if anybody wants to view it as well. So welcome today to Beyond the Breakup, how to empower your clients through their divorce. A three-perspective framework for therapists, which I think most of you are. Just logistics-wise, I think the bathroom does have a code, which is up there. Is it 2191? 2191. So if you need that, feel free. And there are some drinks and snacks and stuff on the back table. Feel free to take what you'd like. I'm going to introduce both my speakers and myself, and then we'll jump in from there. All right, so I'm going to start with, so Kimberly over here, Kimberly McNary. Kimberly helps couples and individuals navigate stepping out of harmful patterns that erode the safety and security of their most precious relationships, clear past trauma, restore closeness, and help empower clients to live life more fully. Kimberly is passionate about reconnecting couples in distress, especially after infidelity. She's trained in emotionally focused therapy and EMDR, grief counseling, and also has special clinical training in treating couples after infidelity. And in addition, Kimberly is passionate about supporting women contemplating, going through, and post-divorce. So Kimberly is the founder of the Classy Girl's Guide to Divorce, helping women stay classy, sassy, and a little bit badassy and find a life they love post-divorce. And I've known Kimberly for a very long time, and she has worked with many of my clients, so I know firsthand both individuals and couples that she has worked with both before, during, post-divorce. See Kimberly, and Kimberly is going to focus on individual therapy components for our talk today. And then Christina Treddy. Christina is the founder of Integrative Couples Therapy in Encinitas, actually right here in this building, because this space is thanks to her. And she specializes in helping couples move out of stuck patterns and toward relationships that feel secure, connected, and resilient. Her clinical work is grounded in emotionally focused therapy, an evidence-based model for building lasting emotional bonds. And she holds advanced EFT training, including work with infidelity, trauma, and sexuality. Christina also offers discernment counseling, which she's going to talk more about today, for couples navigating uncertainty about their future, and also leads Hold Me Tight workshops to help patterns deepen intimacy and communication. And she is also certified in perinatal mental health through the Postpartum Support International, bringing a broader family lens to her couples work. And Christina is going to focus on couples therapy, the perspective from a couples therapist, and we'll talk through some of those different lenses. So thank you, Christina. And then lastly, I always hate introducing myself, but I'm Amanda Singer. I am the founder of West Coast Family Mediation. So I am one of the few non-therapists in this room. And I am a family law mediator. So I am a licensed attorney. I am also a CDFA. For anyone who doesn't know what that is, it's a certified divorce financial analyst. So that is the financial issues that come up in divorce and understanding like both tax and financial issues. And I have a master's in dispute resolution. So I have focused on mediation and family law mediation specifically for my whole career. So our focus is on family law mediation, most of which is divorce. So working with couples who want to be able to stay out of court. So our office handles the whole process for them so that they never go to court, but I'm not representing them individually or any litigation through our office. So I will focus today on the perspective of mediation, as well as tying in how we often work together with therapists and the understanding of what happens in mediation and how might that show up in your office, whether that's with couples or individuals. All right, so let me hand it over to Kimberly to get us started.
Thanks, Amanda. Amanda also does other things too, like she wrote my husband now, she wrote our cohab agreement when we bought our house before we were married. So she does all sorts of things. And that was really important to me to have. So
told you bad at introducing myself. Bad at introducing myself.
Well, I just wanted to say there's
Thank
more
you.
than just family. Yeah, that is family law. So it's been great.
Yeah.
So how many of you work from an attachment perspective? Most of us do, systems perspective. And divorce, I'll say the first thing is divorce for most people is an attachment injury. So those of you that are EFT trained, you know what I'm talking about when we say an attachment injury, but it isn't for everyone. I would say the majority of clients that come in, there is an attachment injury. There's conversations about how it's not fair. There might be affairs that have happened, betrayal, trauma. I should also note that I am not taking couples right now. So I don't really list myself as a couples therapist at the moment. I got burned out over the last 5 years with the betrayal trauma stuff. And I'm kind of putting that, and I'll send it over to Christine, just working with individuals, mainly helping them emotionally regulate. But it is an attachment injury in that. And even when someone chooses a divorce, that also brings up, like we think, oh, they chose it. So they're the ones, they've been grieving the relationship long before they've made the decision typically. And our job is to validate whatever position they're in, not decide for them. I think we all know that as therapists, we don't make that decision for them. We might have some inner thoughts. Hey, Kristen, we might have some inner thoughts about, what we think about their marriage or the ending of their marriage, but we don't advocate and we don't decide for them. So that's really important. We just help them with the process. For those that, here's what's happening physiologically when a breakup happens. Well, we all know about our amygdala and our frontal cortex, and our amygdala starts taking charge. I remember when I went through my divorce 11 years ago, I was very anxious, filled my calendar with people and things, and hope, like that was my way of getting through the grief. And the reality was it wasn't helpful. It was a safety-seeking behavior that didn't really help me feel safe. I needed to do the work. I needed to process the emotional experience, and that's what we get to help our clients do. Everybody's different. They come in with their own family of origin issues, which will definitely come up in their marital dynamic. And then that continues throughout their divorce, unless they do the work and we help them provide the reflection for that. So the amygdala takes over. Its only job is to search for danger, and it doesn't distinguish what actual danger is. It just reacts, right? Fight, flee, and freeze. And so those are the types of things we'll see. We'll see protesting. There's a lot of, I work with mostly females. A lot of clients come in, they're talking about how unfair it is, that their spouse never showed up in the marriage as a real parent. And all of a sudden, I'm just going to use terminology. I'm generalizing. I know that they're same sex and all of that, but I'm just going to say he didn't show up as a father, and now all of a sudden he wants to be a father. Well, the reality is it's best for kids to have a relationship with both of their parents, albeit unless there's abuse. And I won't be discussing affairs, abuse, and addictions, although those will come in. I trust that you have done your work and know how to work with those. And if you don't, you'll refer out. But what happens is they come in talking about how unfair it is, and all of the grief that they feel starts coming to the surface. And our job really as individual therapists is to help them emotionally regulate so they can make clear decisions for themselves and especially for their children. Does that make sense? And I'll get to that in a moment. And I'm interactive, so if you have any questions, I think we're waiting till the end. And he's awake. So some of the things you'll see, so I'm a big proponent of talking about safety-seeking behaviors and what they are. So they're not really safety-seeking. One of the ones that I had during my divorce was I kept trying to get my ex-husband to be friends with me. Why can't we get along? Why can't we act like civil individuals in front of our children? Like, what is going on? And I would do all the people-pleasing tactics that I had to try to get still trying to get his approval. It never worked. And it only made me feel worse. So that's one safety-seeking behavior. Another one is avoidance, right? It makes you feel safe, but you're avoiding the issues that need to be addressed individually inside. For those that initiate the divorce, sometimes we can get surprised by the amount of grief that they hold, even though they've been grieving the relationship before they divorced. That grief will show up at family events, developmental events like graduations, You know, I don't know how many of you have been through divorce, or you've been a product of a divorce, or you know someone that's been divorced, but those are really hard. And the parent that is saying, I won't show up if the affair partner's there, I won't show up if your mom or dad is there, right? They're doing a disservice to the children, but the children need one stable parent. That's all they need, is one stable parent. I forgot to change this. Where's the PowerPoint? Just click. Okay. Okay. So empowering them. And I'll let you guys take one of these and pass it around. These are some great questions. Amanda's also going to have a PDF available afterwards. These are some great questions that you can work with your clients. Just take one and pass it on. There's 2 different ones. You can ask your clients as you're working with them to help them see their part in the negative pattern that got them to where they're at with divorce. I'm not saying there's blame, but we each have a responsibility in partnership, right? We help develop whatever that negative dynamic is. That's where Christina comes in and working with the couples, is helping our individual clients see their part. Because if they don't, and they're not self-reflective, I think it's not rocket science, they're going to carry it into the next relationship. They're going to put it on their kids. And gray divorce is on the rise. That's anybody over 50. And gray divorce children are usually grown. And they have a different, there's like loyalty binds that they have to deal with. And my job as an individual divorce therapist is to help my clients see how their behavior is impacting their children. Because oftentimes that safety seeking behavior looks up like, I'm just going to be your friend. I'm going to talk about my dating life. I'm going to tell you all about what's going on with this. And the child absorbs that, adult child absorbs that. I don't know if any of you have been through that. And they end up like feeling resentful or responsible for the parent that's safety seeking with them. And that's just not, it's just not right. It's just not right. Okay. Sometimes there's delayed grief. You have a client who comes in, they're avoidant, they get numb, they act like they don't care, but they're in your office, and that grief will show up later. I'm a delayed griever, so it showed up way after the divorce was final. I just needed to get through that legal process. And that's another thing. We are not the legal is not in our scope. It's not. So we don't give legal advice. We might share with them about how the process works, how Amanda might work with a client, how she's a neutral party, right? Mediators are neutral parties between the 2 of them, and how they can have more control over the outcome if they do mediation or collaborative divorce versus the litigation route. But sometimes the litigation route is the only solution because we've got one partner who absolutely refuses to work with the other partner in mediation. Let's see. With those that have chosen the divorce, we oftentimes see a lot of guilt, like, oh, I'm disrupting the family. I'm changing the structure of the family. And we help them through that grief by helping them differentiate where their responsibility lies. Again, we don't decide for them. I don't encourage divorce or celebrate it, but I'm there to help them through that. Okay. And then I think the big piece here that most of us, well, I'm assuming most of us, is around the co-parenting dynamics. So Amanda's written a chapter in a book that I often recommend to clients called Putting Kids First. And that is literally my focus when I'm working with parents, either with their co-parenting plan or with them individually. Because I hear a lot, especially the women that I work with, I hear a lot of hurt and pain coming out by talking negatively about the other parent. And that doesn't do the child any service whatsoever. They get to have a loving relationship with both parents. And if we're talking bad about them, what the young child absorbs is, oh, if my mom is bad, then I must be bad too. Okay? So we really want to pay attention to those as they're talking to you about what they said and did. We want to pay attention to those cues. And once I have an alliance built with a client, one of my first questions, and you'll see that on the sheet, is, okay, so let's just have a discussion around, what did your ex complain about? Not like we're going to agree with him or her, but let's just look at that. Is this an area that you'd like to work on? And I listen to those complaints. Mine was, I play Words with Friends. I've been playing since 2011. I was on my phone when I got home a lot. And part of it was I was sitting with clients all day. I got home, I had emails because we can't do that in the middle of a session, right? Answer our emails. And I was so burned out I was a brand new therapist right before I got divorced, at least licensed therapist. And so I was on my phone a lot. And so I had to work with, okay, that was an anxiety, safety seeking behavior that I've been working on so that I could show up differently in my current marriage. Does that make sense? That's just a small example. Let's see. Co-parenting. the biggest piece, and I'm still learning about co-parenting. I'll admit that. My children were all grown when we got divorced, so the loyalty binds that they were in were the biggest thing that I tried to eliminate as much as I could, but I was a very anxious person. I remember when after I did my work, one of my daughters said to me, like, "You have our mom back." It took a couple of years. And I felt it. I felt that shift because again, even though we mutually decided to divorce, there was a part of me that thought we could figure this out. And we tried. We went to couples therapy. We saw some of the biggest trainers in EFT, and we just couldn't figure it out. So I went through a period of time, and I'm sure he did too, where it was like, could we maybe held space for it? And then after I did my work, it was like, no, I need to emotionally regulate myself. And that's the most important thing. So emotional regulation leads down to the kids, right? If your client's having to manage the emotional load, the legal load, the business of divorce, we want to help them emotionally regulate so they can make great decisions for their children, the co-parenting aspect, and the legal process. And I don't know what modalities you use for that. I use EMDR for that, talk therapy, EFIT, emotionally focused individual therapy as well, to help them see and connect with that part of them that was probably there in the marriage and is showing up even amplified during the divorce. Okay. Those patterns don't automatically disappear when they go through the divorce. So let me go to my notes for co-parenting. Sorry about that. Okay, so the attachment bond shifts, and there are these loyalty binds that the kids feel. We told our kids that we were always going to be family, but the structure of our family was going to change. And I felt that that was a good way to navigate. We will always love you, take care of you, be there in your corner, but our structure is going to change. And that's the biggest shift for kids, right? They go from one home to two homes most times. One of the homes may be newly set up, so they don't have everything that they need. We want to make sure that they have the same items in both homes. Granted, I know there's financial concerns. And the shift for most parents is around this ex-spouse mindset is now a co-parenting mindset, right? And that's hard. Co-parenting with someone that maybe you don't like or you've been fighting with for years. And they have a different style of parenting. Maybe they're the more permissive parent, you're the more structured parent. Kids just need stability in your client to be able to navigate those going back and forth to the differences in the homes. Again, if you're upset to share a client, give me timing too. So let me know when my time's up.
Okay, halfway through.
Okay. I have a client that I'm working with now. She's an adult in her 40s. And when her parents got divorced, her stepmom, when she'd come home from her biological mom's house, would make her do her own laundry. She wouldn't touch the laundry that had been at her stepmom's house. But you can see the impacts that has on her now. She learned to be the good girl. Her feelings didn't matter. So we're working through all of that so that she can show up in her relationship now. She's not going through a divorce, but this is the product of a divorce, even 30 years later. And that type of behavior it may not be reported to you. They may not be reporting what they're actually doing, the things that they're saying. So be direct and ask. Ask them, how are you handling those situations on the outside when you're feeling this on the inside? What are you doing? Do you get big and loud? And I'll raise my hand and say, I've gotten big and loud, just to be vulnerable and let them know, like, it's okay, but we want to help you with that. Were the kids around while you were crying? It's okay to see you cry, but we don't want the kids to feel responsible for your sadness. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. We want to be healthy and show them that we have emotions, but with that. So it's that mind switch of going from, for some clients, I've been trying to get you to be the co-parent that I needed during the marriage, and now you're showing up. So it's a lot of grief that you're working with that. I'm always about regulation, emotional regulation before responding. This is an obvious one. I encourage my clients, wait 24 hours before you respond. And when you respond, just respond to the business of the message, either email, text, or phone call. Do not respond to any emotional triggers you're having or what they're triggering in you. And that's hard, right? I liken it to a candy bar on a shelf over here. It's like, I want that candy, but I've got to get through this session. So I'm going to look over there. I'm going to see, I'm like, that feels good. I can't wait to eat it, but I'm going to leave it there and I'm going to wait 10 more minutes. And then I'm going to wait 10 more minutes. And what that helps build, so regulation is built. Reactiveness happens. But we want to help our clients build that regulation internally, which gives them a lot of confidence and allows them to make those clear decisions about their children, about the legal process. It's imperative. Most of my female clients will come in, they're really undone. They've got a lot of financial worries. If they're not the main income earner, and there's a lot of fear about what their life is going to look like. We also want to help them think about co-parenting from not just a now perspective, but a future perspective as well, because things are going to change. If your child is 3 and you're going through divorce, things are going to change when they get into school. Schedules are going to change. So opening them up to the flexibility of that change and how to manage that change, whether it's through the legal system or in mediation, is really imperative. And I'm sure I'm not saying anything you clinicians don't know. Also, co-parenting often triggers old attachment triggers, right? From the marriage, from their own childhood. And that's where we want to be really of service to them and helping them emotionally regulate. I can't say it enough, emotionally regulate. We also help them grieve the loss of the ideal parent. I don't know, our kids were 18 and up when we divorced, so we didn't have a lot of that, hands-on day-to-day co-parenting that we had to do. But there were a lot of things that we had, like splitting the cost of one of our daughters flying home. I definitely did not make anywhere near what my ex-husband made, but I showed up, I split it anyways, just for the good of my daughter, right? I didn't put myself in any financial distress around it, but I did do that I didn't want to fight. I didn't want her to have to worry about which parent she was going to ask to pay for things. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And we want to support differentiation. Clients need I can't say this enough. Clients need stability in themselves. And a child with at least one stable parent, stable in themselves so they can be stable in the parenting, is the key. So you might have an unstable parent on the other side, but if you have one stable parent, I know it's hard going back and forth. That's where child therapists, I'm not sure if you have any in your practice, right? With kids.
We have someone that is renting space in here that works with kids.
Yeah. So again, contact Christina. I don't know how many of you see children, but it's attorneys. We've got analysts. All of those are really, really important, but I understand not everybody can afford, or the fear comes in around what they can afford. But we want to keep them future minded too, not just for the kids, but for themselves. Yes, you're fighting to have the house so your kids can stay in a stable environment, but are you financially prepared to take care of that house after the divorce, after your ex-spouse loses their job and says, I can't pay you anymore? Like we have to help them think about all of those things so that when they are in the legal process, they can make clear decisions for their family and their children. Let's see. Differentiation and, protecting the child from the adult dynamic. Your children do not need to hear, not your children, your client's children do not need to hear that their dad had an affair or their mom had an affair. That is an age appropriate thing. It's hard. We want to justify to the kids that I'm the good one. I didn't do this. Your dad, your mom is the bad one. And all that does is mess with the kids' emotional landscape. Like I said, they absorb it as something's wrong with me. So I would say 50% of my clients are aware of that, but they still make those mistakes. And again, it goes back to emotional regulation. So the kids don't need to know all that. They don't need to know anything about the adult matters at hand. And as much as it feels good in the moment, safety seeking, that really isn't safe, right? As much as it feels good in the moment, it's not good. So I gave a list of a whole bunch of questions that you can generate and ask your clients. Hopefully they're helpful. And co-parenting I'll just leave you with this. Co-parenting isn't about having a good relationship with your ex. It's about having a stable relationship with yourself in the presence of your ex. So I am the founder of Classic Girls Guide to Divorce. I help women navigate divorce because orange jumpsuits and rage texts are never part of a long-term plan. And thanks for having me.
Yeah. So I don't see that here. Oh, no, you're only assume.
Okay, okay.
Sorry.
Oh, that's totally fine. Okay. Hi everyone. I'm Christina Truddy. It's nice to be with you all today. As Amanda said, I am a couples therapist, and I'm also trained in an approach called discernment counseling, and I'll be talking about how to work with clients from both perspectives today. But real quick, I just want to see who in the room works with couples. Okay. Wow, almost everybody. Who in the room would sort of identify themselves as being a couples therapist? Okay, all right. And the only reason why I ask that is that I think that sometimes there's some people that like sometimes work with couples, and then there's other people where the couples really does make up a large portion of their caseload. And then I also want to know who here has experience with divorce, either they've gone through it themselves or their parents divorced. Okay. Okay. And again, I'm only asking that too because I do think that a big part of being able to effectively work with our clients is being able to really look at ourselves and see what it is that we're bringing into the room. So, one thing that I think is really important to take note of is that clients come into us and they start therapy, and sometimes we get those couples that are their goal is they want to stay married and they want to have a great relationship, and divorce is nowhere near the table. And couples therapy works really, really well in these situations, right? We've got two people coming in saying we want to do whatever it takes to have the best relationship we possibly can. And so we align ourselves with their goals and we do the work. But it's not that uncommon for people to come into couples therapy and one or both people might be thinking about divorce. And in fact, I would say it's actually pretty common that that's part of what's finally getting them into therapy, that things have gotten so bad that they're actually contemplating divorce. And then along those lines, though, I also want to say that it's important that we understand that thinking about divorce is not the same thing as a decision.
Mm-hmm.
And people often will vocalize that they want a divorce, or it'll come up during fights, during dysregulation. And it's definitely something that needs to be paid attention to, absolutely, but it doesn't necessarily mean a decision is made. So part of our work in couples therapy is to first get clear on what is the goal, what is bringing them into therapy. Is their goal to stay married and to move forward in this direction of having a great relationship? Or is their goal to figure out if they want to stay married? Or is their goal to divorce? Right. And there's different shades of gray of all of these different goals. But I think one of the very first things we want to do is just get really clear ourselves where they're at. That being said, it's not always going to be the type of situation where they are going to fit into these neat buckets. There is a lot of ambivalence with a lot of our couples when they first start therapy. That's why they're with us. And so it's absolutely okay for us as a therapist to slow down. And in fact, we need to slow down in order to help them slow down. So I want to just kind of check in with the room. Who here, well, I just want to hear maybe like you guys can all just share like sort of popcorn style. When you're sitting with a couple and one person says out loud that they are thinking about a divorce or thinking about breaking up, what happens for you? Like, what do you start to notice happens inside of you? If anyone wants to share. Yeah.
No.
Right. Okay.
Or think finally.
Okay. Yeah.
Finally you said it.
You're right.
Yeah, maybe.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Either or, depending.
Yes.
Because as you were giving the examples, I'm thinking like, what about that gray area client that says they're committed to being married and don't want to get divorced, but they don't do anything different, right? Like
Sure.
every 6 months later, we're just doing the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes. So we have our own thoughts and ideas that come up, and we have our own protection around our clients and our own hopes and dreams for them and their relationship that can get triggered when they tell us that they want a divorce, based on the fact that we've been with them sometimes for months or even years.
Yeah.
Once this is finally vocalized.
Mhm.
Okay. Anyone else have anything that they want to share? Yeah.
the kids immediately go to, oh crap, custody.
Mhm.
Yes.
Mhm.
Literally.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. And I think sometimes too that when you said like, oh crap, custody, that's important that we're thinking about this, right?
Mhm.
That we're sort of considering all of the factors that are going to present themselves if they do actually take steps towards divorce. Anything else?
I think for me, it's like the finally piece, like, okay, good.
Mhm.
And immediately empathizing with the other partner.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Mhm.
the other
Mhm.
Yeah, and I think that this is one of the trickiest parts about the couples work too, is that we've got their relationship as our client. We've got two people sitting in front of us. One person might finally start to feel relief, although as Kim said, even if they've made a decision to divorce, this does not mean that they're celebrating.
Right.
Right? That they might finally be coming to a decision, but they are probably experiencing a whole range of emotions. But then the other partner might be immediately devastated. And this unfolds right in front of us, and we have to find a way to hold both of it.
Mhm.
While at the same time not sharing our, all right, it's about time.
Yeah.
You know?
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Where did it feel like to use your voice? Yeah, nothing.
Right. Or the part of us that's like, can't you hang on a little bit longer? What
Right.
if you try even harder, right?
Mhm.
So it's really a lot for us to hold.
Mhm.
Okay. Oh yes, yeah.
Sometimes I think I had a professor in grad school who was a couples therapist, and one of her kind of rules for couples that was like you never threaten divorce, like unless you're going to do it.
Yeah.
You don't threaten it, you don't bring it up unless you're going to do it. And so I always kind of have that in the back of my head, and it's a little like perplexing sometimes, kind of gets in my way.
Yes, and I'm glad you bring that up, because I think that this is something that people will do. Like they will threaten it. Sometimes it's an actual threat. It's just coming from dysregulation. Other times it's not it's not a fabricated threat. There's some truth and reality in it, but they might not be ready to take action. But one of the things that I try to explain to my couples is that if you're thinking it, don't say it out loud in the heat of the moment, because that's only going to create even more pain, distance, and discord. It's only going to add fuel to the fire. If this is something that's coming up in your fights, that's part of why we need to do the work in therapy to regulate everyone's emotions, so we can actually have thorough divorce discussions, which I think is what this is. Yeah. So that there's a difference between a couple is fighting and they're dysregulated and one person throws out the divorce bomb, versus a couple coming together and having a thoughtful, collaborative conversation. There might still be a lot of emotion. It might be very painful, but hey, we need to talk about this.
Mhm.
Things have gotten so painful that I am really thinking about divorce, or I finally made a decision. But I do think it can be helpful. And this is, again, like, Kim mentioned, we're all trained in different models. When I'm working with couples that are thinking about divorce or going through divorce, I do become a lot more directive and a lot more tool oriented and practical versus my typical couples EFT therapy, where I'm going deeper. So I will say to couples, you have to take the divorce bomb out of it can't be a strategy you use anymore. You got to put that away. And instead, if this is something you need to talk about, we need to talk about it. But don't threaten it, because it will slowly erode and destroy the relationship.
Mhm.
And then Kim also mentioned we are not decision makers, but they will pull us into that.
Mhm.
They will want to know what we think. They will want to know what our opinion is, and we can have our own thoughts and opinions, but it is really important that we do not share with our couples what we think they should do, whether we think they should get married or stay married, whether we think they should separate or divorce. I think there is a couples therapy model that out there that it actually is different on this, and that the therapist will share their opinion, but that's not my orientation, and I think for most of us, our ethics tell us to not do that. And so again, the main thing that we want to do is we want to be able to slow it down. If divorce is brought into the room,
It doesn't not necessarily mean a decision is made. Part of the work is to help the couples get clear so they can make their decision. And that takes as long as it takes.
Mhm.
Mm,
Can I ask you a quick question?
mhm.
And I'm not a therapist, but I actually practiced family law for 20 years. And so I saw really, really ugly litigation for
Mhm.
friend of Amanda's hard to say I'm not doing that. And I'm actually burned out and I'm not doing that anymore. I'm actually a debt collector. So you. Because I learned a lot of mediating. But what do you say though when they say, okay, like, well, how long is this going to take?
Oh,
Because that's
For
like
the
we have a
therapy?
pact, or maybe one of them
Or-
says, I'll keep coming for 3 more months, but that's it.
Yeah.
Or okay, a lot of times it's around holidays.
mhm.
So it's like, okay, we're in April. Well, let's see how much we can do before the kids get out of school in summer. Or let's see how much before Christmas or something like that. How do you
Yeah, so and I do think it can actually be very helpful for them to have a timeline. If they are if divorce is truly on the table, but they haven't actually taken steps towards divorce, I think having a timeline in place is really helpful. 6 months of consistent work in therapy is a good amount of time to see change. 3 months is also good too, but it's really I like to have the couple decide okay, we're going to work on this for 3 months, or we're going to work on this for 6 months. And I even invite them to put that date in their calendar of like, this is the date that we want to reassess. I don't have a hard fast rule on that, but I know just change takes time. Changing patterns takes time. Some couples feel like they spent a month in therapy and couples therapy didn't work.
Yeah.
You're not going to get change in a month. But if you've been doing couples therapy for 6 months, a year, 18 months, 2 years, and change hasn't happened, that's a fair amount of time. But still, it's ultimately up to the couple to decide when enough is enough, at least from the way I work. Is that helpful? Yeah. Okay. So one of the things that comes up once a decision is made, especially for the person that didn't want the divorce, is they want to know why. And this can be incredibly painful if they don't get a reason why. So this is, something that can do therapy around. They've made a decision to divorce, but they're staying in therapy for a little while. Normally, once a couple decides to divorce, I do encourage them to continue to work with me. And I explain that it's because I want to help them process their emotions. I want to help them get on the same page as co-parents. I want to help them transition from romantic relationship to a co-parenting relationship. But then also there's some closure conversations to have. So this is a big piece of it, is like, why, how did we end up here? And if we are successful in helping our couples with the emotional regulation piece, they can have some very thoughtful conversations. Often, the reason why they landed where they landed is that they've had years and years of disconnection, years and years of not connecting, not being intimate, not being able to be on the same page, years and years of conflict. Maybe they haven't had sex in many years. There's so many things that have pulled them apart over a long period of time. And sometimes when the couple can at least look, or each person can look within themselves and get clear, okay, this is what was happening for me, and this is what brought me to this point, and the other one can do the same thing. That helps people move through the process with more ease and with a greater chance of being able to be effective co-parents and have potentially a friendship down the road if that's what they both want. And also too, I included this piece on how, sometimes it's not just years of disconnection. Sometimes it's the big things like affairs, substance use, or emotional abuse, or physical abuse. And these can come out at the very beginning of couples therapy. As we all know, in our couples therapy work, there's certain situations that we have to refer out for, right? But I also want to say that it's appropriate in the very beginning of our work with a couple to spend a few sessions assessing for all of these things. One thing that's interesting about discernment counseling, which I'll talk about more in a moment, is that if you're doing work with couples, and some of the big problems that present themselves that might be things that you'd refer them out for, like ongoing affairs, addiction, or emotional abuse. These are actually great couples to send into discernment counseling. So I'll talk about that more in a moment. But so if you can help the couple kind of come to this place and have some closure conversations as to how we got up here, it tends to help them move along the process. One other thing that I want to mention too is that it can be really disorienting for the therapist, because I've had lots of times where a couple has talked about divorce and I think a decision is made. And I think that they're, I've referred them to Amanda. And I think that, and I've referred each person to individual. And I think that this is happening. And then they come back into session next week and they don't want to get a divorce anymore. And it can go like this for a while. But this is because, as Kim mentioned, they've got financial considerations. They've got children to think about. Right? They've got religion to think about. They've got their ethics, their morals, their extended family. There's so many different pieces to the puzzle. And it is not an easy decision. Even if they're in high distress, it is appropriate for them to be thinking about all of the different tentacles and all of the different ways this decision is going to impact their life and their children's lives. So just know that this can happen. I think it can be really helpful if you find yourself kind of going back and forth to do some individual sessions. And in the individual sessions, I do no secrets policy if I do an individual session. But I'll do like the magic wand question, right? If you could have the kind of relationship you really want with this partner, would you want it? And sometimes people say yes. Like if we could actually make these changes, I absolutely would want to save this marriage. Sometimes they say no. There's nothing that could change within us that would make me want to stay. That's pretty clear. They're ready to move on. Another great question is just the scaling questions, right? On a scale of 1 to 10, how committed are you to saving this marriage? On a scale of 1 to 10, how committed are you to getting a divorce? On a scale of 1 to 10, how committed are you to working on yourself and the relationship? So these are the kinds of questions that you can ask to try to help bring clarity if you're noticing that, they're stuck in this place of ambivalence. And then, so you brought up the timeline. I think a good assessment question is, can you take divorce off the table for 6 months and commit to therapy? It's not necessarily you advising them, though you could. But some people will say, yeah, that's very practical. That makes sense. I want to do whatever I can to try to salvage things. And other people, when they contemplate 6 months of therapy and staying in the relationship, it actually helps them get clear that they're ready to move on. Okay. So how am I on time?
5 to 10.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So as Kim mentioned, and as I've already said, this is such a big emotional decision. There's going to be so many emotions that come up, and our job really as therapists, as couples therapists and individually too, is to help them process their emotions, to help them regulate their emotions. If you have a more withdrawing partner, or a more avoidant partner, they are probably going to they're going to use those strategies, right? They're probably going to want to avoid conversations. They're probably not going to want to talk. They're probably going to shut down. They're probably going to pull away. They might get defensive. You'll see this in session, and you'll hear them reporting about this happening outside of session. If you have a more anxious or pursuing partner, they're probably going to become more demanding. They're probably going to sort of insist that we talk now. They might become critical. Again, this is going to happen in session and outside of session. This is where, again, if I'm doing long-term couples therapy and their goal is to stay married, I'm going to handle this through the lens of EFT. But if they've already decided to divorce, I become a lot more directive. And I basically invite them to look at this behaviorally and just tell them, like, your job is to not pursue, and your job is to not withdraw. Your job is to stay steady. Your job is to stay balanced. Your job is to breathe. Your job is to use all of your skills and tools so you can have effective conversations. And you want to bring all of the emotional pain and intensity to your support people. So that's your individual therapist, your friends, your family. And with each other, you want to remain as friendly and neutral as you possibly can. Easier said than done. But that is what I help people do.
Yeah.
And then again, part of what we do is we give them psycho ed on how to talk to their children. Kim already talked about some really important things that she talks to her individual clients about co-parenting, but we have those discussions in couples therapy too. That is so important that even if the person this often happens if an affair happened, the person that was betrayed, they feel like this is so unfair, right? They did not want the divorce. They did not want to be cheated on. And now they have to go and talk to their children and say, we've decided to get a divorce. And it's really, really hard. But part of what we want to help them see is that if they do speak poorly about their spouse or their co-parent, that actually is going to hurt the children. And again, they can bring all of their pain into their individual therapist, and their individual therapist can help them, find their footing. But when it comes to how they want to show up with each other and with their children, we do really need to help them put their children in the center. I've actually even invited couples to show me a picture of their kids once they've decided to divorce, and we're starting to have these co-parenting conversations, just to really bring the children in the room. It normally, once they start thinking about their children, it gets easier and easier for them to show up the way that they need to show up. And then a big part of what we want to do is, again, help them find the appropriate supports. So individual therapists, mediators, and family law attorneys, support groups. And then also too, we want to encourage time with friends, time doing self-care, time doing all of the things that they can do to take care of themselves during probably what is one of the most stressful experiences of their life. Okay. Discernment counseling. How many of you already know about discernment counseling? Okay, so not very many. Okay. So this is a short-term structured process. There's training that's offered by Bill Doherty. And there's only one training out there. It's his training. And if you go to discernmentcounseling.com, that's where you can get trained. And this is a very specific protocol that's designed for couples in which one person wants to save the marriage and the other person is either ambivalent, neutral, or seriously considering divorce. And the goal of the discernment counseling is to help the couple come to a decision about, are they going to just stay with the status quo, right? They're not going to get divorced. Right now they're staying married, right? So at the end of the 5 months, they're not getting into divorce, they're staying married, but divorce is still on the table. And that can be an appropriate place for many people to be. Again, when we consider that the decision to divorce impacts finances, religion, family, children, for some people, even if their relationship is in distress, they choose to stay married because there's other reasons keeping them married besides the romantic relationship. And we just have to honor that that's what's real for some people. So it's either, okay, we're going to stay married, at least for now. The other path that we help them get clarity on is taking steps towards an amicable separation or divorce. And this really gives us the ability to sprinkle in this idea that divorce can be amicable, divorce can be dignified, divorce can be peaceful. We really play an important role in helping that happen. or that we actually can help the couple come to a place where they're going to commit to 6 months of couples therapy and do whatever they can do to create the best relationship they possibly can. And divorce is actively off the table during that 6-month period, knowing that at the end of the 6 months, they're going to reassess. They're going to have a conversation and see where each person is at. One of the things that I really love about discernment counseling is that the focus is on helping each person look at themselves. I'm sure you all know that when people come into couples therapy, it is so common that each partner is looking at what the other person is doing, right? They're so entrenched in blame. That's very typical, but discernment counseling is very directive and helps each person look clearly at, what am I doing? What have I done to contribute to the state of my marriage today? And then in addition to that, they can come up with a personal agenda for change that they will hopefully work on, whether they choose to stay married, divorce, or just stick with the status quo. So each person is going to leave with clearly defined goals for themselves because they want to show up differently in relationships. And then in addition to that, this can be a really important place for us to be able to, like I mentioned a little bit ago, that if you have a couple where there's an active affair, or there's addiction or substance use, or emotional abuse, if you refer these couples to a discernment counselor, because this is not couples therapy, discernment counselors can actually work with these challenges, and it could become a place where the discernment counselor makes recommendations for treatment. And so just know that again, we're not doing deep vulnerable work. We're not doing deep therapy. It's really practical. And so part of treatment, for example, could include, if one person is struggling with substance use and that's impacting the relationship, then the discernment counselor can kind of come to the surface, and the discernment counselor can make a recommendation that person addresses their substance use. And then the other nice thing about discernment counseling, similar to couples therapy, is that we can equip the clients with great resources, whether it's back to couples therapy with a couples therapist, or to a mediator, a family law attorney, or individual therapy. Okay, I think that's it. And I'll hand it over to Amanda.
All right. Thank you, both of you ladies. So much great information for me to hear as well. So I put a question for everyone. How many of you know, like, and understand what mediation looks like? Just generally. Okay, so some kind of, okay, so I'll talk a little bit generally to give a little bit of that information, but want to focus more on like what you as clinicians may see showing up in your offices, whether they're still doing some couples therapy, individual therapy, just all of that. So kind of as a basic level, as mediators, and Kimberly and Christina both mentioned this, you know, a mediator is a neutral third party. So when clients are working with a mediator, and this is helpful to know too, if your clients come to you and are talking to you about their mediator, that mediator doesn't represent each of them individually. Most mediators, especially in family law, like myself, are attorneys, but not all. So you know, there's different backgrounds and different experiences that people are coming from. But no matter what, even if they are an attorney, they're working as a neutral third party, not representing either of the clients individually. And those clients may also have attorneys. So I've worked with Clarice when she was litigating and when she was representing clients where one of her clients was in mediation, right? So they may also have attorneys. So you may hear them talking about different professionals that they're working with, because as we've heard, there are a lot of different professionals within the field of divorce. So in mediation, sometimes they may bring their attorneys to mediation if they feel that they need extra support, or if they want to have a legal advisor there. Other times they could bring a divorce coach. It varies on what that may look like. And as I mentioned before, for our process and for our mediation, we're working through them throughout the whole time. So we're making sure that we're taking care of the legal steps that they actually need to get divorced, as well as working with them to reach different agreements. And when I break down mediation, there's really 3 main areas we're talking about. So if they have kids, 2 if they don't. So the first one is going to be their parenting plan. So that's going to be everything we've talked about co-parenting from the like logistical legal side. So custody, who has legal custody, physical custody, where the kids are spending time, holidays, co-parenting, like just decision making, how they're going to do all of those agreements that have to do with the kids. The second area is going to be the division of assets and debts. So California, you may have heard the term, but California is a community property state. And that just really means that anything acquired during the marriage is considered community property, with some caveats on things that can be separate property. And so we're talking about assets and debts and how that's all divided. And then the third area is support. So there's child support if they have kids to discuss, and then there's spousal support, even if, regardless of whether there's kids or not. And there's always some other issues that come in, but really when we break it down, like those are the three main areas of things that people need to decide during their divorce. So, what's important to understand, that I see is the clients, that is what their emotional landscape is coming into mediation, and what you may then see showing up in your office as well when they're going through things. So, one of the things that I was thinking about a lot when both the Kimberly and Christina were talking about is that, is that it really is like a process. I mean, I have people who come to me and they may still be in couples therapy. They may just be looking for information. Sometimes it's one person and they haven't even told their spouse that they're starting to gather information. Sometimes they're both coming and they're still. So it's very fluid. I've even had people, couples who have decided to start the mediation process. They've signed my agreement, they've made payment, and like a week or two later, they're like, you know what, we want to put things on hold and we're going to try again. And we're open to all of that. Like, to me, that's great. If they want to keep working on the relationship, I make referrals all the time to be able to say, if you want to work on that, here's, someone who can help you, whether it's discernment counsel, whether it's couples, individual, all of that. But it really is, people are at all different places when they, come to talk to me about mediation. And even when they, kind of start the process, I'd say most people, no matter what, are emotionally overwhelmed. There's a lot going on. You just heard me talk about kind of the three main areas, but when you think about everything that goes into that, there is a lot that they have to consider. There's a lot to start thinking about, especially on the financial side. I see a lot of people who it's kind of like deers in a headlight, because they've never thought about the finances before, and now all of a sudden they are feeling the concern, the fear, the shame of not knowing what it looks like. And so there is a lot to be done for the divorce. What we try to look at it is like, how can we break that down into more manageable areas for them, but just knowing that there is a lot that they have to go through. A lot of times I see people, will say, like it says here, they might be sleep deprived, right? They are staying up, overwhelmed, trying to figure out what things are going to look like. And, they need support outside of mediation so that I can do my job in mediation. I will tell you, even if clients don't tell me, I can often tell those that have, especially individual therapists, and those that don't. And I'll ask, one of the ways that we operate in mediation is we do individual meetings first. So I call them a preliminary planning session, and it gives me the opportunity to meet with each person individually for an hour before I meet together. And the reason that I do that is there are things that they're willing to share. There's questions that they're going to ask that they might not want to do with the other person there. Now, different from what you might do in couples therapy, I do keep things confidential that they share with me individually. But I will also talk with them about some of these are things you're going to need to bring up in the mediation. That being said, I will talk with them about whether they, are in therapy, whether they're working, and I will always recommend that they do, because I can tell the difference. I can tell the clients that can come into mediation more emotionally regulated and able to actually make decisions, as opposed to those who they are just so overwhelmed they can't make any decisions. And when they can't make any decisions, sometimes that frustrates the other partner. Sometimes we don't stay in mediation because they feel like, okay, well, we can't make any decisions. What are we going to do? So, that's what I always see as the most helpful, for them. Understanding the role of mediation in divorce. We talked about that there's a lot of different processes, and a lot of different professionals. Mediation is really more of a collaborative approach. Now, you may have heard collaborative law, which is its own thing. Also a great process. It's just different than mediation, but I look at it as working collaboratively, right? So it's as a mediator, I'm not just doing everything for the clients and then they're done. There are many other professionals that are involved in the process, depending on what their situation is, because really we want to reach durable agreement. So that's the way that I look at it, is like, you can reach agreements in mediation, and if they're not going to work, they're going to land themselves either right back in my office or probably in court, because now they're fighting over those agreements. And so the biggest things that I talk about with clients is, is this actually practically going to work? Right? Like, you can have grand ideas about what it's all going to look like and what you want it to be, but is this actually going to work for you guys? When we talk about co-parenting, that's a big area. And I think, Kimberly, you brought up, which I thought was great, the idea of, the parent who's all of a sudden like stepping up and wanting to parent or wanting to have the kids, 50% of the time. That's what I hear a lot, is like, well, I want them 50% of the time. And I try to take the timeshare out of it and really have a conversation about like, what's going to practically work for you and your kids, right? Like, you may want 50%, but if you work from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., can you actually have the kids 50% of the time? So in mediation, it's asking a lot of questions. I'm not, just like you guys are talking about, I'm not a decision maker for them. So I'm not a judge. I'm not telling them like, this is how you guys have to do things. But a lot of times when people come to mediation, they're coming because they need assistance with options, right? Like, they don't even know what they could do, and they need assistance with figuring out, okay, well, here's some options based on what you're saying. And so it's really making sure that they get that information. I'm all about education, right? So it's important that they understand what their options are and what that's going to look like for them. And as I talked about, that's property, that's support, that's custody, and all of that is done without them ever having to step foot in court. And so, the big thing with mediation is that they maintain control of their agreements. And so they're able to decide, like, that's what I want to do or that's not what I want to do. Because one of the things I always say to my clients is like, the judges, one, they don't have time. Like, hearings can be very short. And two, it's not that they don't care, but they don't have the time to care, right? So they're only seeing a very small snippet about your life, your case, your kids, you, and they're making that decision. And if that's not what people want, they usually want to have control. That's where mediation can really come in.
Mm-hmm.
So a little bit about kind of some of the emotional phases during mediation, because as they go through the process, you may see that changing if you're, meeting with them in sessions. So kind of the early sessions, I think that a lot of times what I see from my clients is really like the hypervigilance. A lot of times we're seeing the old power dynamics resurface, because I'm seeing those in mediation too, right? I'm seeing the things that they dealt with in marriage. They don't just go away. They usually amplify, right? And so, my role as the neutral party is to try to help them neutralize any power imbalances. And I say try because that's not always going to just be accomplished by my role, right? And that's where sometimes other professionals help as well. But I think that oftentimes that hypervigilance can show up as them having really difficult times communicating, as well as like even establishing trust with me as the mediator. Like, if they are just on high alert and unable to regulate their own emotions, they can't come into mediation and trust that the process is working and we're going to get through things without that. And so that is, again, where I can see the difference between somebody working with an individual therapist. They then come into the sessions ready to communicate, ready to have those conversations. In the middle sessions, and that's kind of, the middle part of it, is one of the part of divorce that you have to do no matter how you go through a divorce is financial disclosures. So you might hear your clients talk about like, I've got to gather all these statements. I've got to fill out these, this paperwork. And that's their financial disclosures. And that's the information, because without knowing what assets and debts they have, what their incomes are, what their expenses is, can't actually reach those agreements. But I find that when the financial disclosures occur, this is where you really see a lot of the shame and the fear around the money. And especially for like the lower earning spouse, or you may have heard the term called like outspouse. So that's usually a term referred to either like more so the lower earning spouse, but the one who may not have been involved with the finances during the marriage. And so, I see that often where they are just coming into me and saying, I don't know any of this, and feeling like they should have, right? Feeling the shame around, how did I get to this point where I don't even know what assets, what we have. And so, that for me in my role as their mediator, I very much first I'm going to let them know that that's common, because I see it often. Like, and the conversation I have with them too is the idea that you may not know about the finances because when you were married, you each took on different roles, right? There are things that the other person doesn't know as well. It just may not feel as apparent right now because we're talking about the area where they might be more of an expert on it. And then I talk with them about, okay, how do we get that information? Right? Like, we are going that, your spouse has to provide all of their disclosures. If you don't feel that you can go through this on your own because you don't understand it or just feel comfortable with it, I help some, but that's where I bring in other professionals. That's where I may say to them, when I talked about earlier being a CDFA, there are CDFAs are going to work individually with somebody. And I think that that's great for you, you as clinicians to know too, because if you're hearing that, your clients are just like, I don't understand the finances, I don't know what to do with it. Like, having a professional to sit down with them and explain it to them, I find that it empowers them to then make those decisions. And so, there's, when we talk about finances, there's a lot of, I see the fear and anxiety around around the future, right? Because one, it's about understanding what there is now, but it's also like, oh my God, am I going to be able to like pay my bills? Am I going to, I hear often like, am I going to be out on the street? Like, just those questions. And this comes from people where financially, no, they're not going to be, but they don't know that. And they can't look at the numbers and see that that makes sense. So I find that that's the biggest, finances are really that big area. Co-parenting and the kids is the concern for everyone. Of course, they want to make sure that their kids are taken care of. And I find that co-parenting conversations, we always talk about what's in the best interest of the children. And I can sit there and say to them, do you both want what's best for your kids? They say yes. They may not agree exactly how it happens, but they're on the same page more. They're both feeling emotionally like, yes, we want what's best for our kids. When it comes to finances, it's a whole different game, because it's not that, well, sometimes one person doesn't care about the other, whether the other person can support themselves or not, but it's more about just a very different lens on what it looks like. And then when we get to agreements, so we go through, we have our mediation meetings, we reach agreements, and then we draft an actual settlement agreement for them. And that's a long document. I mean, it is usually a minimum of 30 or 40 pages. And I've had ones that are 50, 60. And can be a lot. I will email that copy to people, and sometimes I don't hear anything. And I know that it's probably avoidance. Oh, I haven't even looked at that yet. And it's walking them through it. So I think that, what you may see showing up is that they may feel a lot of uncertainty still at that time. Did I make the right agreements? Should I change it? I didn't, maybe they didn't consult an attorney yet, or didn't consult a CDFA, even though we've been telling them to do so. And now they have this document, and all of a sudden they take it to an attorney and realize, oh, there's so much I wasn't thinking about. And, what I find there is that sometimes they do start to second guess their decisions. And sometimes it's only one of them. And then the other person might get really upset because they're like, well, I thought we were done, right? I thought we had our agreements. I thought we were there. And it's, so it's working with them to make sure that they understand that, one, nothing is set in stone until it's signed and filed. but also, okay, how can, if you can, if they're having those feelings, how can they go back to talk to their mediator, talk to their attorney, and figure out how to move forward without blowing everything up, but being able to support themselves. Okay, just I'll touch briefly on kind of post mediation that, and what I mean by post mediation is like if you have clients coming to you after they've been in mediation, what might you see from them, right? So I've talked a lot about like what they're experiencing in mediation and a little bit here, but just kind of like I said before, that they may come to you, they may feel dysregulated, they may be second guessing their agreements. They may come to you and say, my mediator took the other person's side and didn't listen to me and didn't talk about it. So they're gonna tell you everything from their perspective, of course. And what I would say is that if you as their therapist are able to help them address what they're feeling, help them address if they really felt that the mediator wasn't neutral and didn't listen to them, how can they go back to their mediator and share those concerns with them, right? And overall, as both of these ladies shared, just the idea of not providing legal advice. I know that none of you would, but I can't tell you how many people have come into my office and said, well, my therapist said that I could get blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, okay, maybe you could, but let's talk about what the law is. And my thing is, I can't tell you how many times I say to my clients, I'm not a therapist. So, this isn't an area that I'm going to deal with. So I'm going to say, talk to your individual therapist, talk to your couples therapist. And it's the same thing for you guys, right? It's the same thing of, okay, can you provide them a referral of who that person is? Wanted to, all three of us, discuss just a little bit about kind of the collaboration piece of it. Because that's what really talking about here, right? Is we all, as I just said, we all have different roles. And how can we in our role support each other in different ways to ultimately support the client, or clients if you're working with the couple. And so, there's different ways for each of us to do that. The one big thing I always say is collaboration needs to be permission based, right? If professionals are speaking, which can happen. I have had people who have said to me, can you talk with can you talk with our therapist? And we can, it's just we need everything signed like you guys do and we do. And it needs to be role respecting, right? It's the idea that everybody has a different role and what that looks like. So wanted to just take a few minutes and talk about our own experiences, not necessarily, although we all do know each other and have worked together, not necessarily just working with each other, but ways in which we've seen that collaboration between mediators and therapists. What do you want to start?
Yeah. Okay. So yes. Okay. One thing I think that's been incredibly helpful is to have my few people that I trust and know that I can refer to. Again, I've got my list of people, and I think that the clients find that so supportive. They find it so caring. There's a sense of knowing that, they can mention in their, their mediation sessions with Amanda, and they can say her name, and they know that I know who she is, right? Or they can talk about in their individual session with Kim, and they know that I know who Kim is. There's something about that collaboration that I think is immensely valuable during an extraordinarily stressful time. And then also too, what I've been able to witness when I have been able to effectively refer people, again, to a mediator, to individual therapy, is that they can go from collapse, difficulty functioning, a place of disempowerment, a place of being immensely caught in intense emotion, to finally being able to take those steps forward and one by one by one by one. And for me, I've been able to witness that switch pretty quickly once I know that they're equipped with the other professionals. And then again, being able to have the collaborative conversations is also immensely helpful. So that's how it's worked for me. Yeah.
I'll just piggyback off of what Christina said. Oftentimes clients coming to me are, still contemplating whether or not they want to be divorced, and they're scared. And most of the people that I work with are females, usually not the higher income earner. I'd say the majority of the time. And so oftentimes I will refer them to have an individual 15 minutes with Amanda. She's one of the few mediators that offers that. And it's a valuable service I have found for my clients. Just having that, because information can be really grounding, right? You know, you can chat GPT all you want about divorce, but it's not state specific. You can ask all those questions. But the reality is she's been doing this forever. She knows. So in that 15 minutes, I'll help them prepare. What is the most salient question? What's the biggest question you have? Don't go in there with a whole bunch of like, what do I do here, here, and here? You've got 15 minutes with this lady. Use it wisely. So I'll help them prepare for that. And that can be really grounding, even if they decide not to divorce, even if they decide not to use Amanda. Most of them end up using her anyways. But I think I sent my husband when we were dating to her to sit down and talk about, I just want to make sure you're going through your divorce okay. Like, talk to Amanda. And they did. I asked him last night. He was like, did I? I can't remember. Anyways, they did their divorce on their own. And so it just, information's grounding. And I think I definitely don't step into the realm of what I can give an overview of the legal process. I can give my experience, but even then I'm very careful about what I say because my experience, is going to be different. So having CDFAs, that's one of the things I didn't have going through my divorce. I had no one sitting down with me. I just thought, okay, we're going through this process. He's not going to cheat me out of anything. It's going to be all right. We're both intentional. And the reality is nobody ends up with a fair MSA. Nobody thinks it's fair. So that's where Amanda comes in. And then CDFAs, there's also realtors. I work with realtors who are divorce informed, who can help you navigate credit. You're again, someone who does mortgages and can help with credit, because that's really important if, especially if someone doesn't have any credit or has very little credit, because their spouse have most of it. So that team is invaluable. And I know it can be expensive, and that's usually the biggest fear for clients. But just navigating and showing where the value could be.
Can I answer that from the perspective of when things like totally fall apart, and as a lawyer, you have your marching orders. It's, I'm hiring you to get full custody of my child. Okay, it's not that it's a good idea, and I've done. So, but having somebody like Amanda give 15 minutes is so huge because, realistically, you don't want people doing it. They have to co-parent together for all these years. Nobody went in for it. These judges don't want them there. Like, please go back to your therapist.
And they have less control over the outcome.
Oh yeah. I had clients recently who were with me for a long time mediating, and we had discussed with co-parenting a long time, and they couldn't agree. They ended up going to court, and you know what? They got the exact same orders. Wife wanted sole custody, and I kept telling her she probably wasn't going to get it. And she didn't. I looked at the orders afterwards, and it was exactly what they had been discussing in mediation. But it took a year. I think it took a year, and it took a lot more money because they had attorneys and time. Yeah, exactly. So that's one of the things. And it's like, sometimes no matter how many times you tell them, they're not going to listen and they're still going to go do it. But, it's helping them understand everything that Clarice just said about what happens in court. And yes, I even say not everybody can do mediation. There are 100% going to be those scenarios where people need to, work with an attorney and need to end up in court. But I think that sometimes people just end up there because they don't know there's an alternative. And, they don't know what that's going to look like. And I think one of the things that Kimberly is talking about with like a team is there are different professionals who are trained in divorce, like you mentioned, realtors, lenders. Like, I think sometimes people don't necessarily think about that, and they're just like, oh, we need to sell our home. Okay, so there's our friend down the block who sells in the neighborhood. We're just going to have them, but they don't know the dynamics of divorce. And so I think it is really important, and we've got tons of referrals in all those areas. So if you're ever looking for someone, feel free to reach out. But it's just really important that, like, whoever your clients are working with can support them through what they're actually going through and understand it all. And I'd say, for me working with therapists, I brought it up before, but I can tell the difference, right? I can tell those clients who are ready, who know, like, I know when they're coming from Kimberly and they've got their questions, and, they're not going to spend 15 minutes just telling me about their story and not getting any answers, or coming into mediation that way. But I think the other big thing, as I said before, is people come to us at very different times. And I am all the time giving them referrals back to a couples therapist, to individual therapists, to for the kids, right? We talk about that all the time in the sessions. And, for me, it's so important to know that, therapists also understand what they're going through, right? Like, to me, it's helpful to know, okay, your therapist understands mediation. They might, I might not know them or they might not know me, but they understand what you're going through and, able to help them with that. So I do want to open it up to some questions. Yeah, I know we've taken a few throughout, but anyone has questions, we'd love to answer them. No.
Yeah, I've had a client who is many years post divorce, but they were still battling over custody and finances. She had a lawyer she was talking to, but sometimes she would say, "Oh, can he do this with the finances? Can he do that?" Would you, Amanda, be helpful to someone like that that just needs the information on? Because he was a lawyer and he had more financial knowledge, and she, of course, didn't. She was more of the stay-at-home mom. Are you someone that would like fill in the gap for her, like versus this traditional lawyer?
Sometimes, I mean, what I always say, like as Kimberly brought up, is we're always happy to talk with anyone. And if it's like, it kind of depends on what they're looking for. Because sometimes it's like getting a little bit of information so that then maybe they could get their spouse to talk with them in mediation as opposed to meeting. But if they need individual representation or things like that, that's where I refer them out. But I've got a ton of good family law attorneys too.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, sure.
I was curious if anybody can answer. I've had a few clients navigating either separation and or divorce that once that burden is being nesting or the kids stay. I was curious if you guys see a lot of that and if there's any research on that and kind of how what the latest research says, if any, or just opinions on it, if it's effective.
Yeah. I mean, I can talk from a mediator perspective, but do you?
Okay, so from my perspective, I don't know about the research, so maybe one of you do, but
Nope.
no, okay.
A little.
Okay.
A little, but
Okay.
I can't quote anything.
Okay. But I will say that this appears to be becoming more common, and I think it's because of the economy, especially in our area where it's so incredibly expensive. So this is something that I'm hearing more and more about as couples are separating or divorcing. So part of it, like sometimes they want to do it because they think it's going to be best for the children, and other times they have to do it. Right? They're in a situation where they're not yet able to like have, one person takes one home, one person gets another home, but they can potentially afford a separate like apartment, and then each person goes and stays there while the kids stay at home. So my sense is that if they can do it and it works for them and they're able to communicate and they're able to co-parent and it's okay for the children, then it works. It's just that sometimes what I've discovered is that people try these other alternative things and it's just really hard on them emotionally. And that some people really need their own separate space. And so, but I would say from the kids' lens, that stable base is good probably for the children.
I think Christina spoke to it there. It takes two intentional parents to do that because they're oftentimes having a separate apartment for one to go to. But then imagine when you go back home and your ex-spouse is now in your nightstand or whatever you've got stored there, right? So anecdotally, it generally doesn't work, but it is possible, right? That's where Christina comes in and helps them do that co-parenting.
I'll say what I see is I actually think the ones that do it for the finances, it doesn't work because they're not doing it for the right reason. And not to say finances, of course, but like they're only doing it because of that. And what ends up happening is it's hard. So like the ones I think that can do it and do like if you really want to do it well for nesting, people will actually get two other apartments, right? So like they're sharing the family home, but then when they each go, they're going different places. Right. Financially, that is not many people can do that. I think I've had like one couple over the years that like could afford it and did it that way. Other times what I see is that it's usually a short-term thing. Yeah. So they'll agree to do it for a specific period of time and then go from there. And I think that kind of usually works better because it's kind of a stepping stone as opposed to the long-term solution. But if they're going to do it, and I have some resources around it. If you send me an email, I can send you some of the books and stuff. But if they're going to do it, we talk a lot about what happens if it doesn't work. And I like to build into their mediation agreements very clearly when are you going, how often are you going to revisit this? What does it look like? Is it, my advice is always that if one person says they don't want to do it anymore, that they stop, but that's not always what people want to do. Like they're like, well, we want to make it, I want to make it work for the kids. Why should they just get to say no? So there's a lot of conversation to be had. And I will say, I've had very, very few couples that do it and do it long-term.
And I would say if you're going to work in this realm, get educated. You don't have to I'm trained in mediation. I'll be trained in collaborative divorce this summer, but I don't mediate divorces. But I am cheaper than an attorney. So if Amanda finds they just can't make a decision about co-parenting, she sends them to me and I help them mediate it in my office because I'm trained in that. But then I send them back, she writes up the agreement, etc. So again, I didn't know anything about parenting plans because our kids were all adults when we divorced. I've gotten educated in it. And I'm not the expert. I generally I think the biggest thing as therapists is asking the right questions to help them think about future, right? Mm-hmm. Think about when you come home from a date and your ex-husband is in the house and how are you going to navigate that, right? Yeah. That's hard. My ex-husband and I did it real quick. We did the kids were out of the house, but we did it where 1 week I got the upstairs, that's where our bedroom was and all the rooms. And then 1 week I got the downstairs. That lasted about a month, right? Because whoever had the downstairs had access to the kitchen and all of that. It was just awkward. It was so awkward. And we did it until our home sold. And then he actually finally moved out. He's like, I can't do this. And I'm like, hey, on, right? It's just hard. You're emotionally detaching while going through a really hard legal process.